Most of our presentations here rely a lot on folklore, but I do my best to tie things in with historical accounts whenever possible. Granted, not all questions are ever answered, but hey, that's part of the fun with the type of themes we discuss here. Imagination and a little touch of magic are the keys to enjoying these types of stories. But some of these stories end up leaving more questions than others, and one in particular kept nagging at the back of my mind: the mysterious Dr. Koku. As we've discussed in our original presentation almost a year ago, the magician Dr. Koku mysteriously showed up in early 20th century New Orleans, claiming that the recent natural disasters that had taken place within a week of each other all across the world were a result of a conspiracy of demons to destroy the world, and that he was there to stop them. Dr. Koku hung around New Orleans for about 3 weeks, generated a ton of buzz, then simply disappeared. The information I used for my research had little to offer, but his story remains, drifting on a silent breeze ever so often inside the city of New Orleans. At the time, the majority of my information came from the research of Tony Cale from his book Stories of Root Workers and Hoodoo in the Mid-South. Little was offered in the way of sources, so we just took everything with face value, and that led to some enjoyable speculation with you guys in the comment section. Where did he come from? Where did he go? What all did he know, and how did he come to know such things at the time? Heck, what even was his name, as all the work I could find simply referred to him as Dr. Koku. But recently, I decided to return to the subject of Dr. Koku, mostly out of fun, with some new research methods and tools that I have access to now, and I found a bit more information pertaining to his time spent in New Orleans, so I thought I would share what I found with you all here. And those of you that joined in on the speculation and guesses as to what this man's background really was should not be surprised that a lot of you were correct. Although we'll still be within the realms of speculation for the most part, maybe some of this new information will give some hints and help us narrow down our windows of speculation. And to start things off, we have a name: Abraham Abdullah Koku.
Everyone loves a good, strange, weird, or bizarre story. Well, welcome to the American South, where dark legends and haunted history lurk around every corner. Where superstition, folklore, and a touch of backwoods magic blend with everyday culture. Some say, in order to survive. This is Dixie After Dark.
A couple of months ago, I was tagged in a video by the channel Ray's Occult Books After Hours on a video about Dr. Koku, one that referenced my original presentation. In looking at what they had to offer, it was an alleged personal journal entry from the very reporter that interviewed Dr. Koku. I strongly urge you to check out that reading and my original presentation to get up to speed with Dr. Koku. But it isn't entirely necessary to enjoy this one. If you don't, though, I think it's safe to say that your interest will still be piqued, so I'll tag both videos at the end of this one, as well as in the description below. In a nutshell, though, there had been a good number of natural disasters happening all around the world, and Dr. Koku emerged on the scene in New Orleans, claiming that he knew what the cause was. According to Dr. Koku, they were all due to a conspiracy going on amongst various evil spirits, a plan that he learned about from those very same spirits. Ray's Occult Books After Hours mentioned that the journal entry was from a reporter at the Times Democrat in New Orleans, So that gave me some more information to look at, and I uncovered 4 consecutive days that Dr. Koku appeared in that publication, plus another letter to the editor type entry from a believer in Dr. Koku, then various mentions of him in later days. Rather than rehash my earlier presentation on Dr. Koku, I thought it'd be fun to go down the timeline of the news articles I found, as they give us a 4-day window into Dr. Koku's time and dealings in New Orleans. Today, we'll read the articles for what they are, interject some thoughts here and there, and ultimately let you make up your own mind.
From the Times-Democrat on Wednesday, May 21st, 1902. Conquers the devil. African magician and mystic performs miracles. According to his own statement, he is the biggest demon tamer in the world. Martinique catastrophe, Texan tornado, and Tennessee mine horror caused by Ahriman, the prince of hell. Dr. Koku, an African magician and voodoo doctor, a man of great renown among those who have faith in mysticism, has been in New Orleans for the past 3 weeks. He has lately visited the Congo district in Africa, collecting the herbs necessary to make a certain magic broth, he says, that will make most evil spirits go way back and sit down. And when he has succeeded in arriving at the exact proportions necessary to make his experiment successful, he will leave for the land of the lotus flower, where he intends to perfect himself in the most esoteric magic of the East.
The land of the lotus flower could possibly refer to the lotus eaters from the epic The Odyssey, a secret island where the inhabitants pretty much stay hopped up on drugs to find higher enlightenment.
During his residence here, Dr. Koku satisfied himself with a small, lonely, deserted little cottage on the outskirts of the city. Here, he says, he makes his incantations and communes with spirits, both good and bad, some of which, it is said by detractors, come from a corner grocery.
That phrase, comes from the corner grocery, is a slight at Dr. Koku, insinuating that this was all made up, a slight that he'll take some offense at, as we'll find out later on.
What Dr. Koku says of his latest researches in the land of magic is at least interesting at this time. He claims to have some remarkable information given him, he avows calmly, by Ahriman, who was king of the evil spirits during the time of Zoroaster, and who, it is understood from Dr. Koku, is at present a sort of general business manager of earthly affairs for Satan.
Here we find reference to Zoroastrianism, an ancient religion we speculated at in our original presentation, so it seems we were all originally on the right path.
Dr. Koku says that by reason of having found the lost seal of Solomon on the shores of Syria, he was enabled to dominate over Ahriman, and to compel that powerful spirit to speak to him without reservation. Ahriman, he says, confessed that evil spirits have formed a great conspiracy to do up people of the earth by degrees. Dr. Koku mentions in his connection the late disasters, the volcanic eruption in Martinique, the explosion in Pittsburgh, the meat riots in New York, the further eruptions in St. Vincent, the race troubles in Atlanta, the tornado in Goliad, and the mine explosion in Tennessee, all happening within a short period of time.
While we continue through the articles, there will be mention of the practice of voodoo throughout. We've talked about in our original presentation that voodoo is basically a catch-all term for magical practices of the day, especially those pertaining to the black community. It was obvious for me from my initial research, as well as with this new information today, that Dr. Koku did not practice voodoo, so just keep that in mind as we go forward.
Understanding that the alleged magician and voodoo doctor was not averse to talking for publication, a visit was made to his lonely quarters yesterday afternoon, just after dark. After the visitor had repeatedly shaken a little wooden gate, the Nubian attendant of the doctor, a slim, not unattractive-looking youth of 17 or 18, appeared at the front door of the little cottage. He came to the gate slowly, took the visitor's card without uttering a word, and after having disappeared into the house, returned, still silent, and, opening the gate, led the way into the little cottage. The hallway and most of the rooms were entirely devoid of furniture of any kind. Only the front room had anything in it. This contained a plain table, a number of ponderous books, and a few oriental rugs arranged in Eastern fashion. One of the rooms, into which the visitor looked in passing, flashed with light. Upon closer inspection, a large, black, phosphorescent circle drawn upon the floor was discerned. In the front room, Dr. Koku, in an Eastern robe, sat at a low table. He was reading a volume in Hebrew as the visitor entered. Rising, he, with true Oriental politeness, bade his guest welcome. Dr. Koku is tall and stately. His face, though dark, bears the marks of fast and deep study. He speaks English as fluently as he does 7 or 8 other languages. His face, however, is not handsome, though it is not noticed as soon as the man begins to talk. While the nature of his discourse sounded strange in the 20th century, the depth of knowledge, both of men and books, that he showed was nothing short of remarkable. However, only that part of his talks which relates to his alleged conspiracy of evil spirits will be given now. Dr. Koku motioned to the visitor to seat himself on one of the Turkish rugs. He folded his legs in Turkish fashion and seated himself on the other side of the little low table, bearing a human skull, upon the top of which 2 or 3 candles were stuck. White sperm ran down upon the arch beneath which once played the fancies and happiness and sorrow and clogged eyes which once sparkled with pleasure or anger. Dr. Koku wore a loose Eastern robe and the Mussulman turban.
No, I did not try to figure out what they meant by sperm in the article. Maybe it was a turn of phrase for the day. Maybe it was literal. Either way, I wasn't going to add that to my internet search history. That's bad enough as it is. As far as Dr. Koku's wardrobe, though, we start to get some hints. The article refers to a Mussulman turban, the word itself referring to a follower of Islam, so at least the reporter took Dr. Koku as Muslim, as did many of you in the comments section of the first video.
You naturally have little regard for the wisdom of the East, began the magician. You despise its people, who are contemplative and studious, who fast and meditate, and seek more than earthly life can give to a man. So be it. I speak to you nevertheless, without apology. You desire me to tell you why I believe that there is a conspiracy of evil demons to demolish the earth. I tell you that because I know it, because the confession has been made to me by him who is chief of them all. I was led to make the investigation by reason of omens which I received. It is fashionable in the Western world now to look upon beliefs in omens as rank superstition. A man who believes in them is considered a fool. In the past, it was not so. Marius, banished, was about to land in Sicily when he saw 2 lizards fighting. The augurs told him it was a bad omen. He immediately decamped and saved his army, for a much greater force lay in waiting for him. Caesar was warned the night before his assassination. His windows flew open at the dead of night. When he sacrificed a chicken, it was found to lack a heart. All these things and others he disregarded, and was killed, though he did intend at first to yield to the warning dream of his wife, for Caesar ordinarily observed omens. I hear at St. Pierre, the day before the eruption, cattle ran bellowing through the city streets. With the crass ignorance of the Western world, no attention was paid to these unusual happenings, nor to the rumblings of the mountain. The better forces of the universe were warning the people, but they did not know it. So much for that.
And now, Dr. Koku goes into his time spent in New Orleans.
During the day last Friday, I went with my slave to your slaughterhouse for the purpose of buying vital organs of the beef which I desire to use in my experiments. Some of the men, after killing a fat steer, cut off his head and threw it to the ground. As I looked at it, I saw the eyes open and the tongue lick up the dust. By my studies, I immediately knew that this signified an undue activity of the evil spirits. In addition, as I sat at my studies the night before, a dog from the street came to my door just on the stroke of midnight and howled. As I walked out to my lonely little house, I made a determination which meant much to me. I saw that the universe was on the verge of much disturbance. In my former experiments with the forces of the great unseen, I had often called upon the lesser spirits, Azelus, Montezan, and others who acknowledged the ways of Solomon, and many of the lesser demons who came under the control of the ministers of Mahomet. But I never dared call on Ahriman, who is head of them all and the most powerful spirit next to Satan. I resolved, however, to make the attempt, though I knew I risked utter destruction. I fight against evil spirits, and it is only fear of my power that causes them to appear and to tell me things. I had been successful against all of the lesser demons by using the incantations of the Kabbalah. Against Ahriman, I had but one hope, the Seal of Solomon, which I found last summer on the shores of Syria with the help of my art. I fasted for 2 days in a dark room, bathed and purified myself, and clothed in a white garment made the experiment Sunday night, a time at which prayers are ascending all over the world and demons have less power to work evil. Slowly, Dr. Koku rose from his recumbent position. Taking the skull with the candles upon it in his hand, he said, "Come, I'll show you the scene of my terrible struggle." Dr. Koku led the way into the room where the black phosphorate circle was drawn on the floor. His tall figure, capped by the turban, was reflected upon the bare walls, whereon other strange shadows seemed to form. Despite his Occidental training, the visitor felt chills creep up and down his back. It is here, after my fast and my endless repetitions of the hidden words and phrases of the Psalms of David, that I came, clothed in all white, purified against all uncleanness, said Dr. Koku. Placing myself in the middle of the circle, I killed 6 white doves and sprinkled their blood around me. In my hand, I held the wonderful seal of Solomon, which for many ages had been lost to the world. I repeated the mysterious words graven on the seal, calling upon Ahriman to appear by the name which can only be pronounced by the initiated. Suddenly, the room was enveloped in flames. Their tongues darted toward me, but I held the seal firmly in my hand, and the fiends could not violate the circle. Again I called. Ahriman appeared in a variety of forms, as a red bull, a lion, a unicorn, and a spotted leopard. The room was full of shrieking demons. The bull, the lion, the unicorn, and leopard sought to break the circle. Not for an instant did I show fear, for then I would have been destroyed. Finally, I called aloud 3 times, and Ahriman himself, ugly, gloomy, and sullen, his head touching the ceiling, appeared outside the circle, and asked angrily, "What would you, human bound?" Though he glared at me and gnashed his teeth, I made him answer my questions. I asked him what all of the late disturbances in the universe signified. He told me that he had ordered them, and that greater calamities would shortly fall in different parts of the world. He said that he intended to destroy the earth, bit by bit. He announced that there would be further earthquakes, and that entire continents would be destroyed. Dr. Koku halted in his account, and led the way back to the front room. "In this broth that I am preparing," continued the doctor, "is a charm by which these demons will be prevented from carrying out their plans. I will boil it in my cauldron next Friday night, for, as I told you, I am for the good and not the evil spirits. Again I will call Ahriman and his ministers to appear, and by my Solomonic token I will enjoin them from further proceedings. If you would like to be present, and are not afraid, I will be glad to have you here. Salam alaikum. Farewell."
Although the publication repeatedly refers to Dr. Koku as African, his dress and actions seem to suggest otherwise, especially with his closing of Salam alaikum. That is an Arabic phrase, predominantly one used by followers of Islam, but it is known to be used by followers of other Arabic religions. That concludes the first appearance of Dr. Koku in the Times-Democrat, but their offices received a visit from the doctor the very next day.
From the Times-Democrat on Thursday, May 22, 1902. Koku the Strenuous. Magician states his objections to modern slang. Disclaims all fear of prosecution, since, as he says, he is fighting the battle of good against hellish machinations. His interview with Ahriman to take place Friday. Dr. Koku, the African magician and demon tamer, attended by his Nubian slave boy, called at the office of the Times-Democrat yesterday, attracting a large crowd on the way by his dignified carriage and his foreign appearance, and while admitting that he had been correctly quoted in the main article published in yesterday's Time-Democrat, asked politely if he would be allowed to criticize certain portions. Dr. Koku said, "The young man who wrote the article used a few frivolous phrases which I do not think my courteous treatment of him warranted. Whether he believed what I said or not, he should have refrained, at least, from endeavoring to render me ridiculous. I refer particularly to the slang contained in the comment that the decoction I am brewing is calculated, quote, to make all evil spirits go way back and sit down. If I were a fakir," continued the doctor, "I would not object to anything that would serve to advertise me and make me known to the people. But I am a lover of truth, a student, a meditative man, with no thought of acquiring money of any people, for I have ample wealth of my own. $42 million of your money, I believe, and it shocked me to be treated in the light manner adopted in your article."
Here, Dr. Koku seems to want to differentiate himself from a fakir, a Muslim or Hindu ascetic, a monk for a lack of better words, typically associated with South Asia and the Middle East, again separating himself from the label of African. We also get the first glimpse of Dr. Koku talking about his wealth. $42 million would be a ton today, so it'd be even more substantial in the early 1900s. Almost an unbelievable amount.
Dr. Koku insisted, previous to being interviewed in the first instance, that the location of his present residence in New Orleans should be kept a secret. He is preparing for his great experiment directed against evil spirits Friday night, and he does not desire his studies and his meditations to be disturbed by the curious. All day yesterday, telephone messages asking for the number of the lonely little house occupied by the doctor were received, but under the promise, no adequate answer could be given. About a dozen people came to the office of the Times-Democrat and asked for the doctor's address. One Syrian brought as a gift a magic wooden cup and a piece of oriental carpet supposed to contain certain mystic virtues. I understand that the police have endeavored to find my place of residence in order that they may prosecute me under the fortune-telling ordinance, said Dr. Koku. I may as well tell you that I knew of the existence of this ordinance before I came to your city. In order to avoid trouble, I secured a home in the outskirts, but as a matter of fact, the ordinance does not apply to me, as I am in no way making trade of my art or victimizing anyone in any way. In seeking to destroy the late strenuous activities of the evil spirits in Martinique and elsewhere, I am working for supremacy of truth and the good of the world. As I promised your young man, continued Dr. Koku, he may be present Friday night when I make my experiment. I will also invite 3 of the most distinguished thinkers and materialistic scientists in New Orleans to be present. If their desire for knowledge be greater than their fear of the unknown, they may see for themselves whether I have power to call up Ahriman, the most powerful demon connected with the earthly jurisdiction. Dr. Koku says that he will leave New Orleans next Monday. He will first go to New York and will then sail for the East. He says he intends to make a visit to the Grand Lama of Tibet, the reincarnation of whom has lately been celebrated by the adepts of Buddhism.
Here is where we find out about Dr. Koku's plans after those of New Orleans, where he states he will go to New York and then Tibet. As a matter of fact, it seems that he was ready to leave New Orleans the following week, so it'd be safe to assume that arrangements had already been made, helping to explain the upcoming quick departure from New Orleans. But let's not get ahead of ourselves.
From the Times-Democrat on Friday, May 23, 1902. Desired no audience. Oriental sage and foe of Satan seen again. Police make inquiries anent Dr. Koku's domicile. Discretion demanded by mystic, although he disdains all fear of earthly powers. Will raise shield tomorrow, he says. Dr. Abraham Abdullah Koku, who endeavored to secret himself from the world for a week in order to complete some experiments he is making, necessitating proximity to the Gulf, has attracted a great deal of attention by reason of the article about him in the Times-Democrat. Policemen and detectives were yesterday looking for the lonely little cottage on the outskirts of the city, but as the magician has carefully selected an out-of-the-way place, and as he says that he has drawn around the cottage a circle which no one can pass without his permission, the watchdogs of the law have, as of yet, been unable to find the right scent. Acting Superintendent of Police John Boyle asked the Times-Democrat for the address of the man, saying he believed him an impostor. While it would be proper under ordinary circumstances to furnish the police department with information, in this instance it would be necessary to secure from Dr. Koku a release from the promise given to him to keep his place of temporary residence a secret. For this purpose, the reporter who had secured the interview from him was sent out to see him. All day long, people were either telephoning or coming to the office to ask for the address. The anxiety of some of these people was so great that they had been told that the doctor had no existence in order to make them cease their importunities.
Good for you, Times Democrat, good for you. On top of seeing their display of journalistic integrity on display in the early 1900s, we also get the first and only mention I could find of Dr. Koku's full name, Abraham Abdullah Koku. Hopefully that's something that can help some of you other researchers out there.
Dr. Koku was found in the front room of his little cottage, deep in some old volumes. His Nubian slave boy, who opened the gate, smiled, but as usual uttered no sound. Ushering the visitor into the house, he bowed low to his master, then disappeared. Dr. Koku was told of the inquiry of the acting superintendent of police, and was told of the number of people who wanted to see him, and of a few who earnestly desired to be present at the experiment tonight. Certainly I have no reason to fear the police, Dr. Koku said gravely, after having read the communication. As I said yesterday, I am not doing anything in conflict with your laws. I am not trying to deceive people from their money. As to having any other except the 4 that I have selected to witness me call up the demon Ahriman tonight, it is out of the question, and I earnestly ask you again to keep faith with me and not divulge the location of my little house. In making the selection of 3 men beside yourself to attend tonight, I have tried to choose men who would not be easily frightened. It is not my desire to draw a curious crowd. Only those who have done wrong, or who are without money, have reason to fear the police, continued the doctor. I can place myself too quickly in communication with my bankers at Calcutta, Alexandria, London, and Paris to be afraid of persecution. But I would not need to do that in order to meet any fines that might be imposed by the local authorities. Look here. The doctor took from under one of the oriental rugs a bag full of American gold pieces. He also unlocked a small box containing an assortment of brilliant gems of all kinds, diamonds, rubies, emeralds, and pearls. Some of the diamonds were uncut, some attached to a delicate little gold chain or set in handsome rings. It was distinctly an oriental display of wealth, evidencing the Easterner's love of tangible evidences for fortune. A man with such a bodyguard need not fear the police, commented the doctor, with an ironical smile. Dr. Koku yesterday sent his slave boy to 3 professional gentlemen of New Orleans, asking them to be present at his home tonight. All accepted and promised to meet the boy at a certain place and not to bring others with them. The boy will escort them to the magician's house, where, as soon as it is dark, Dr. Koku will perform his mystic rite and call for the appearance of the powerful demon Ahriman, who he shall endeavor to defeat in his plans of destruction by the power of the mysterious decoction which is now ready. Dr. Koku explained that the demons are now operating principally in the islands of the Gulf, but will soon go further north. He is engaged in a small house in an isolated district not far from Bronx Park in New York, and will leave for the metropolis of this country Sunday or Monday.
Again, we find the doctor's plans to continue on to New York after his work in New Orleans. It appears now that he was in New Orleans out of necessity rather than choice, at the mention of the proximity needed to the Gulf, as well as the medicinal plants mentioned in the journal entry provided by Ray's Occult Books after hours. But this article was from the newspaper that Friday morning, and the ritual was scheduled for that very night. Let's see what the Times Democrat has to say the morning after.
From the Times Democrat on Saturday, May 24th, 1902. Fake fakir, so-called Dr. Koku exposed by committee. Depended on hashish to make witnesses believe a devil was to be exorcised. Instead of millions, he has nothing, and leaves his Nubian slave boy howling for his wages. Dr. Koku, the African magician, like most jinni of his ilk, when put to the test, proved to be a rank fake. A reporter of the Times-Democrat and a committee of 3 gentlemen, in response to his invitation, went to the little cabin on the outskirts of the city last night for the purpose of seeing him call up Ahriman, a prince of evil demons, who, according to the doctor, had been causing the late disasters in Martinique and elsewhere. Dr. Koku asserted that he would call up Ahriman, and by virtue of a charm which he had concocted, prevent him from working further evil. The reporter went first to the house. He found Koku in his white robes. Koku, with his usual impressiveness, said he had sent his Nubian slave boy to meet the other gentleman. He was shown letters addressed to him by various persons asking for advice. Koku read these letters, then said gravely, "I am a student of demonology, not a fortune-teller or a fakir. I have ample wealth, and would not attempt to pervert my art by using it in individual cases." Dr. Koku tore up the letters. "As I cannot answer them, I may as well destroy them," he said. "The people who wrote them would naturally not care to have them read by anyone else." In a short while, the 3 gentlemen appeared at the gate, led by the Nubian boy. Their names are not given because of subsequent developments. They were rather disgruntled at having to come out simply to unearth a fake, and begged that their identity be kept a secret, saying otherwise they would never hear the last of the matter. Koku began proceeding by having his boy bring in a cooling Eastern drink made, he said, of the juice of a pomegranate. When his guest had taken a few sips and found it agreeable, the doctor went on to say that the ordeal through which they would have to pass within his magic circle would be very hard upon them, and that he would give to each of them a little paste that would have the effect of steadying their nerves. He produced this paste, but the medical man present instantly became suspicious. He examined the paste and said that he believed it was hashish, an oriental drug by the action of which the most grotesque visions are produced. A lively indignation against the doctor began to develop, whereupon he said that he could proceed without the use of the powder, but said that he would first have to go forth under the moonlight to free his robes from the taint of tobacco smoke, 2 of the gentlemen having cigars in their mouth. That was the last seen of the doctor, however. When he reached the front gate, he opened it and disappeared down the road at a rapid lope, his white garments floating like a cloud in the moonlight. The committee was a little mad at first, but then the gentlemen began to laugh. A search was made of the almost empty house. Dr. Koku's jewel box was opened, and was found to contain bits of Bohemian glass. They looked like diamonds in the candlelight, but a close examination proved their worthlessness. As the gentlemen of the committee were amusing themselves by denouncing the doctor and cursing their own folly for taking a long trip, the dumb Nubian slave boy spoke. "Say, gents." The committee stood aghast as the sound of the thick African vocabs with Mississippi tinge issuing from the supposed mute's lips. "If you ain't got no objections, I wish you'd tell me something." "What is it?" asked one of the committee.
And well, the article then goes into some dialect and slurs of the day that I'm not keen on using, especially here. In a nutshell, though, the boy claimed to have been a shoe shiner named Jim Washington, and that Koku had hired him to play his attendant. He was forced to play the role as a mute in exchange for 800 silver dollars a week. And that was that. That was the last reported sighting of Dr. Koku in New Orleans, and the last sighting I've been able to uncover. There are some spattering of other mentions of Dr. Koku in articles following his disappearance in New Orleans, some just making reference to him, and one that wishes he was there to stop a 13-day rain and flooding that the city was experiencing. Granted, there isn't a ton more information than in our original presentation, but there's a good bit if you dissect the wording of the articles. In my original presentation, we looked at 3 possibilities with Dr. Koku. Possibility number 1. Dr. Koku could have been an elaborate hoaxer. Well, the May 24th, 1902 article addresses that pretty good, at least to the untrained eye. Still though, I find it hard to believe that a hoaxer would go that in depth with the language and terminology of the day there in 1902. I have to imagine a lot of that information was hard to come by. I'm also intrigued by the idea of a possible hoaxer that was refusing clients and never took pay from anyone. I'm not sure what angle that would be for a con man, unless it was just fame he was after. But then again, it was the newspaper, police, and the citizens that generated all the buzz around Dr. Koku. The man himself seemed content on just being left alone. Possibility number 2. Dr. Koku was just well-traveled. I disagreed with that possibility in my original video, questioning as why a man of color would voluntarily choose to settle in the South during a time when Jim Crow laws were in full effect. Also, that type of traveling would take a considerable amount of wealth. Well, we now see that him being in New Orleans was not as voluntary as it seems. We now see that he was here looking for a particular medicinal plant. And as far as the wealth needed to be that well-traveled, Dr. Koku seemed to have it, if he is to be believed. Sure, the hoaxer article discounted his box of jewels, but it caught my eye that it made no mention of the bag of gold that they mentioned in their first article. Perhaps Dr. Koku had it on him when he fled. Or maybe it didn't exist at all, and the reporter failed to point that out. Or, how much do you want to bet that one of those guys pocketed it, or that they left it out of the report and split it amongst themselves? How many times have we seen that before? Police make a bust and retrieve $100,000, only to report $50,000. Which leads us to possibility number 3. The third possibility we discussed was Dr. Koku was telling the truth. Looking at that with an open mind, I still stand by my original idea that Koku's methods and arts that he spoke of were too esoteric for the area and time frame. We also touched on Koku's work with the demon Ahriman in my original presentation. Ahriman is the demon found in Zoroastrianism. Koku made mention of Zoroastrianism in one of his interviews as well. By all accounts I could find, Zoroastrianism first came to the U.S. by way of student immigrants in the 1930s, making Dr. Koku's mention of it beat those accounts by 30 years. Another good test of truth versus a hoax is, does it stand the test of time? The fascinating thing to me is that Dr. Koku spent only 3 weeks in New Orleans, and here we are, 123 years later, still talking about it. I lost track of Dr. Koku after his departure from New Orleans. One where he was said to flee after being found as a con man, but a departure he already had alluded to in his interviews. He already pointed out that he wasn't staying long, and it was obvious that the men he invited to his ritual weren't there to take it seriously, or even try to have an open mind. Let's stick with the idea that Dr. Koku was legit and telling the truth. What kind of danger were those men going to be in while not cooperating with Dr. Koku's instructions? All accounts across those few days continuously point out how small his cabin was. I don't get the sense that all four men, plus Dr. Koku and his attendant, would all fit into Koku's protective circle. Perhaps Dr. Koku's quick departure saved those men's lives. Not that Dr. Koku particularly cared about them, but what kind of negative stain would their harm put on his future work? Besides, if he had just called it off that night and told them that it was due to their lack of belief and cooperation, it would have resulted in the same news article, and perhaps confrontation, as well as them giving in and handing over Koku's address to the police and public at large. That would have been even worse, regardless of if Koku was legit or a con man. In the end, we're still left with a lot of questions, but at least for me, is a lot less questions than before. I don't have as much access and connections in New York as I do with the archives in the South, since it's outside of my wheelhouse, and I definitely don't have access to the areas like that in Tibet and so forth to continue tracking Dr. Koku through his travels. Perhaps one of you can take this information and pick up the trail somewhere else. If you do, let me know. I'd love to know what became of the mysterious Dr. Koku. As for wrapping this one up, I'll end it the same way that I ended our first presentation. Dr. Koku claimed that demons were set on destroying the world in 1902, and he was there to stop them. Well, here we are, 123 years later, and we're still here. Make of that what you will.